So I want to dedicate today's shir to the yard site of Adam Seeff tonight. It's 2 years since many people's words, especially his parents, his sister, his grandmother, the life turned upside down. Obviously, it's also the yard site of Reg, and there's many other yard sites around this time. But specifically, I want to focus on the lessons of Adam. One thing that his parents made it clear is that they really want the legacy of his untimely passing to be an awareness of mental health. So I want to speak about mental health, and again, with the qualification that I am not a professional on the health element of it. In other words, I'm not a medical professional. Um, Unfortunately, medical health is still partially science, partially art. We still haven't fully, gotten a full understanding of how it comes, why it comes, and long-term solutions. Thank God we have much more than we had 100 years ago. We have medicines, we have therapies, but for anybody who struggles with mental health, they'll know that it's not like a cancer that you could remove. It doesn't really go anywhere. Um, and it's a battle for life. And recently, there's been an absolute, oh gosh, bomb, explosion of mental health issues. A lot of the stuff that people have had have surfaced, new stuff have come, but a year in lockdown, stresses, life stresses have really pushed us on the edge. And there's no question that we are struggling with mental health in a way that humanity's never seen or never been aware of. So it could be 1,000 years ago, people were struggling with it, but the awareness of it and how it's affecting us is beyond. And I said this on the radio yesterday, and I want to repeat it, that we fail to realize that this is the real challenges of life. We think that the challenges of life are the government, corruption, anti-Semitism, COVID, and those are all challenges. But those are not the biggest battles. The biggest battles that we wage and the most consequential battles are the ones we battle in our own heart and our own minds. And mental health is a spectrum. So for the argument of this year, I'm not necessarily talking about clinical mental illness. I'm talking about any wobble that even people who are not diagnosed with a mental illness will go through. Sadness, loneliness, self-pity, anger, the inner world, and how many of us are struggling with it. And the problem is that the consequences of this inner world are tremendous on our own physical health. We know now more than ever that our mental, emotional health has a huge consequence on our physical health, but also on the people around us. Someone asked me earlier today what I'm going to be talking about on this year, and I said, like, one thing that's coming clear to me over and over and over is how few of us have a clue about what makes family work. So today I'm taking it from an angle of mental health, but I really want to address the family aspect. We all went to school, and we all got a basic education on knowledge. We all were raised in a civilized society, so we were told how to eat with a fork. We were told how to keep our hygiene. We were told, how to present ourselves. We were told how to get dressed, etc. There's just basic skills of life that, unless somebody's growing up in a very primitive society, they'll come out with. Some better than others, but there's a basic baseline. Pretty much any kid that graduates school, whether they go to regular school, whether they go to special education, there's also a baseline of what they walk out with. But when it comes to emotional well-being, there is no baseline. There's no baseline. There's no basic standard of what people can expect of themselves and from their children when they hit, let's say, the age of 18, finish schooling. So you have very wise, smart, not wise, smart people, successful financially and economically and career-wise, who have the emotional well-being and maturity of a 2-year-old on a tantrum. For real, so many people. You have people who went on the biggest journeys of life, like marriage, parenting, who have the mental, emotional capacity of self-discipline, self-control, nuance of a baby in diapers, in nappies. There's no baseline. And what I'm finding more and more and more is that, yes, there's tsuras that are beyond our control. I cannot save people from COVID. I could daven, but I'm not a medical professional. Even the medical fraternity is struggling so much to save lives. But here's what I do know. Most of the issues we're struggling, even in the time of COVID, are within. And a lot of those issues have solutions. Yes, mental health, mental illness, as I said, clinical mental illness doesn't have an ultimate solution, but there's definitely maintenance as a way of living with it. But when it comes to most people, there's like, not most, many, there's no baseline. There's no baseline of accepted emotional maturity, of an emotional health that a family needs to have. I cannot tell you. I always thought I knew, but recently I've only come to know. Almost every single family I get involved with, there is a major variable in the family. And at some stage, I'm like, wow, gosh. Because as a community, we're really good to each other. We really are. We're a great community. But as I told somebody, and I believe it to be true based on my experience. Again, my experience is small, just my world, but I would say this community has got community rights, but doesn't get family rights. I don't know if there's other communities that do. I'm saying outside South Africa, but this much I know. We don't get family rights. The balance of supporting one another, but not being enmeshed in one another, enabling, but not disabling, creating healthy interdependence, not codependence. These vital skills are things that most of us never work through. You see, here's the issue. You could come from a damaged home and still be very successful in areas in life. You could come from a very traumatic background and achieve success. But the one area you will not achieve success if you've been hurt in your childhood, unless you do a tremendous amount of work, is in family. Because at home, in a family dynamic, is where all the bluff is off. You can't fool anyone. It's there. It's raw. It's in your face. And most of us, again, many of us don't do enough work to show up and present what we really are capable of. Because let's be honest, we're all hurt by our childhood. And as Jews, we all have trauma in our blood. It's in our DNA. And epigenetics has shown us how literally it can actually trigger, epigenetics is basically, I'm not a professor on it, but it's the basic understanding that we have today of genetics, that events that happen to you in your life can trigger certain parts of your genetics. In other words, and actually become, you're not only the nature of your genetics, you're the nurture of your genetics as well. And as Jews, that's, there's so much wisdom and greatness, but there's also so much trauma. It's in us. Mental health and mental illness and mental struggle is part and parcel. Again, I don't know other communities, and it's not my problem. I know as Jews, there's a lot of struggle. And yes, we came out of the Holocaust, and we built Jewish communities, and we went to Israel, and we so much to be proud of. But emotionally, we have a lot of work to do, a lot of work to do. And nobody's talking about it, or I don't hear anybody talking about it. We're growing in our Yiddishkeit, thank God, we're growing in our Torah wisdom, but there's a basic part of being a Jew, being human, and that is growing your character, growing your emotional maturity, growing your perspectives, growing your self-awareness. And the only way to bring healthy families into being is by healthy people raising families. Unhealthy people cannot raise healthy families. Miracles can happen, but they're miracles, they're not the rule. Again, in education, there's no foolproof system. But there's certain things I know for a fact don't work. And one of the things is a parent who's not dealt with their stuff. The kids might still end up okay and functional, but they'll be playing out the same stuff next time because intergenerational trauma is real until somebody stops it. It's the only person, let me put it this way. School could teach you what to think and could teach you how to navigate the world. The only place that teaches you how to feel and how to navigate feelings is home. You see how your parents, your mother and your father dealt with tough feelings. You see how they dealt with disappointment. You see how they dealt with tension. You see how they dealt with fighting. And that's what you learn. That's what you learn. And therefore, there's so much pain because that's the one area in our life that many of us have not advanced in. We don't know what's going on in other people's houses, but we have an assumption that that person has it all together. But once people open up, you start realizing how many unsolved issues there are in the best of families, because that's the way we are. Whereas humans, we have unsolved issues. That's okay, but we have to work on solving them. Accept that they're unsolved, and then we work on them. Bring more health into our families. Our families are not healthy enough. We might be telling our kids all the right messages. We might be making sure they get a good education and a good Jewish education, but we're not good enough in teaching them character. They see us screaming at our spouse like a 5-year-old. They see us getting faribbled over the dumbest, pettiest things. And that's becoming their reality. That's becoming their universe. You could tell them from today to tomorrow about your values, but they're seeing it. And that's what is being inculcated subconsciously into their way, that one day they will be triggered the same way you are, and they won't even know why. You want to raise a good family? Raise a good person, yourself. You want to have a good marriage? Raise a good person, yourself. Often people, when it comes to, especially when I'm trying to convince mothers to take care of themselves, they'll say, yes, 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 but I have to take care of my family. As if it's a question, either you or your family. Listen here. If you're not okay, your family will be okay. Straight out. If you're not okay, your marriage will not be okay. It's just the way it is. You could only have a product based on what you made the product with. And if you showed up to create the product with dysfunction, with unhealth, battered, sad, angry, then that's what it is. That's the home we're building. So this idea as if we have to choose between ourselves or our family, it's ridiculous. There is no such choice. There's just you. And the more you work on yourself, not in a selfish way, but you work on your character, you work on your refinement, you work on your stuff, you'll be doing a million more favors spending an hour in therapy working through stuff, or spending an hour in nature working through your stuff, than schlepping your kids around to an extramural. You'll be doing a bigger favor for them, not for you. For you as well, but that's not the point. If you're a person that's saying, I'm playing martyr, I have to play it for them, you're doing them a favor because they will have a healthier parent an hour later. They will have a healthier parent who, went and took a massage for 2 hours just that they could be able to be present and calm later on at home. You're doing them a favor. Families don't need so much of the stuff that we give them, and so much of the stuff they do need, we don't give them. For example, they don't need money. Your kids do not need a fancy car to grow up okay. Your kids do not need abundance. Yes, they need food on the table and basic dignity. They don't need that. On the contrary, it's risky. If you have it, mazel tov, but they don't need that. They don't need you running around screaming that you're working like a dog to support your family. They want to see you, not just hear about how you're supporting the family. Because at some stage, you're not even buying it. Because they know that you're working an extra hour not to support the family because you're avoiding being home. But what they do need is role models, is emotional help, is a home where you can express your feelings and it's not choked. A home where you're told how to express and then how to control your feelings. It's not just everybody expressing their feelings in an absolute drama zone, but a place of self-worth, a place where they see their parents constantly working on their character. That yes, maybe mom and dad had a fight last night, but the next day they see that mom and dad are not having the same fight. It's not deja vu, it's not Groundhog Day every single night with the same pettiness. That they see that the parents are maturing as much as they want the children to mature, if not more. That's what they need. Holidays are nice. Money is nice. Even Friday night meals with grandma are nice. They're all nice. They're not necessary. For a year and a half, the past year and a half, we didn't have meals with grandma. It's sad, but it's not necessary. But here is what's necessary: a healthy home environment, a self-aware home environment, a place where kids are allowed to rebel in a safe space, a place where kids are allowed to question, a place where there's no awkwardness around each other and around issues, a place that people are taught to debate respectfully, a place that's loving, parents who are not deflecting their own issues on their kids, but are able to take their ego aside and be there for the child and be there for their spouse. A place that anger is rarely there. Impossible to say never, but rarely. A place where they see their parents fighting with their impulse for jealousy. A place where they see the parents are fighting with their impulse to get hurt and self-pity. That's what the kids need. And if that's the goal, then we have to spend our time and our choices differently than what we're doing. Because in order to do that, you have to sleep enough. I'll give you an example. If you're sleeping 4 hours a night, there's no way, unless you have a specific body that can survive in 4 hours. I know a few people, most people not. You cannot survive on 4 hours and have emotional control. I don't care what stories you tell me. You could physically cope after 4 hours a day, some of us, but you cannot cope mentally. You cannot cope mentally without eating 3 meals a day. You can't. Your body can handle it, but you can't cope mentally. You can't cope mentally without taking care of some basic physical exercise. You can't cope mentally without learning something every day and rezoning yourself. These are the stuff you need, again, for their sake, not for yours. It's not called self-care. It's not selfish. But we were not put into this world to martyr ourselves for other people. We were put into this world to influence the world through ourselves. Martyrdom for children is a cute value that has nothing to do with how Torah sees motherhood or fatherhood. Not at all. You are not there to live your kid's life. You're there to live your life. And part of your responsibility is to raise kids. That's one of your obligations, one of your privileges. You have the privilege of marriage. But the biggest privilege and responsibility you have is to be the best person you can be, because you don't have control over your kids. The only person you have control with, or should be having control with, is yourself. So focus inward instead of constantly outward. Instead of thinking that we're doing our kids so much favors by that extra hour of work, or that exceptional holiday, or a barmy for all barmies that will go down in the legend books. I promise you, a fancy barmy will not add anything to your kid's integrity. Zilch. Might add to your pride. Fine, you're right. I'm not saying it's vain. It might be what you feel you need, but don't convince yourself you're doing your kid a favor. You're not. Because the 6 months you've been stressing about making that barmy and freaking out about it was a much bigger disservice, because they didn't have a present parent during that time. The Talmud says that anger in a home is like a home that's infested with worms. We should aim to have less angry homes. We should aim to have homes of true empathy, where our kids can talk to us. And not just like, okay, my kid could tell me anything. No, talk to us and bond. To have real relationships with our children, to have real relationships with our spouse, to have real relationships with ourselves, to have real relationships with our extended family, real relationships with our neighbors, our friends, but all starting from within, a healthy relationship with myself. But if I'm running around like a chicken without a head, not sleeping, not eating, not taking care of my mental health, not taking care of my physical health, and I think I'm saving the world, no, you're not. You're not. You might be saving the world, but you're destroying home. Yes, as a rabbi, I'm supposed to be preaching about, kindness and generosity and reaching out. But I'll be the first one to say that if you don't have enough to give your family, don't give to anybody else. Cut off all your obligations. If you don't have enough to give to your spouse, your children, your parents, cut. Aniye ircha kodmin. The poor people in your vicinity come first. If you have capacity, then by all means, you have an obligation to share. But we have to constantly be assessing, how is the mental health from 1 to 10 in my house? How is the health of my home? Where is the health? Where is it? How do I diagnose it? Is it a space that's comfortable? How's the tension at home? How's the misunderstandings at home? How's the consistency and stability of the home? How's the marriage? But more importantly, how am I? Am I holding on just with my fingernails, or do I have a grip? And we all have moments that we feel like we're holding on our fingernails, and then we have to go inward and we have to step back. The courage to actually say that taking off an afternoon and going to take care of yourself is not weakness. It's strength, if you're doing it for the right reasons. To step away out of life, not as an escapism, but because we have to recenter ourselves, is an obligation, especially now during what we're going through in COVID and this and that, and all the tensions and all the tsaras and this and that. We need to regain our center, to regain our balance. a while ago when I was doing training, so I was working a lot on balance. So eventually, by the time I was done, I was, standing on those half poles and figuring it out. And then I didn't work on my balance for a long time. Like recently I started going on, I realized how unbalanced I am. And that's a good analogy because if you're not working on your balance constantly, you could be working on your, various muscles in your body, but you have to work on your balance specifically to get your center. Otherwise, you could be very strong and just trip on the floor because you're not balanced. You're not physically balanced. A lot of us are off balance now, and we have all the good reasons: lockdown, COVID, finances, tension, crazy world, anti-Semitism, war in Israel, all good. But Hashem does not ask us to carry the world on our shoulder. He asks us to carry ourselves. There's a great statement in the Talmud that I say very often, where basically at some stage in the Talmud, like someone's complaining and saying, like, this world is such a mess, and it uses the expression, the world is a vineyard. And the Talmud says, Yaveh bala keren, let the person who created this vineyard come and solve it. In other words, my job is not to save the world. It's not. We're told we are. Go save the world. You could conquer the world. No, you're not. Please don't. Can everybody stop saving the world? Do us a favor. Save yourself. And save the people around you that you can. And then expand. But nobody's here to save all 7 billion. Only God. Our community is beautiful. I said that at the beginning, really. I'm not talking about specifically our show. I'm saying the South African Jewish community is amazing. But our families are in desperate need of work. Desperate need of work. We built up infrastructures. We built up the UOLs, and we built up the Ched, and we built up Yad Aron, we built up Atzala. We are fantastic. But our own families, they're a mess. A lot of parents hurting their children in so many ways. I'm sure all unintended, but so many people who've been hurt so badly by their parents. So many marriages that fell apart because one or both of the partners were not able to look inward and take accountability. So many siblings who couldn't work things out and now don't talk to each other for decades. It's pathetic. It's understandable, but it's pathetic. There has to be a baseline of what is accepted in our families. There has to be a baseline of understanding, a baseline of families working with each other, of functional homes. There's too much dysfunction in our homes. It's not okay. We have all the good reasons with the generational trauma, this and that. We have to tackle it. Enough is enough. You might think you're in the right, and you might think you're justified, but if your wife, if your husband, if your children, if your siblings are telling you you're off-centered, then believe them. You're off-centered. So get back on center. Bring the health back to the family. Bring the health back. Bring the sanity back. Make that your single biggest priority right now. Because yes, we need to solve the world's problems together with God. And only after we solve our own. And most of us will never finish solving ourselves. So what we'll do is we'll have an impact on us, our families, and a few other people around us. And that is more than enough. That is more than enough. Let's do what it takes. If you need to take care of your physical health, if you need to go to therapy, if you need to go talk to a wise person, if you need to go on medication, whatever it is, let's remember that charity starts at home, and that sanity starts at home, and that ultimately we have one obligation: to live our own lives on the highest level of integrity. Everything else can follow from there. Shkoyach, everybody, and thanks.